All right, so some big moves in Ravenland has brought together Michael Crawford and Dev Panchois with Russell Street. Wanted to break down the Ravens' latest additions, Pernell McPhee and Shane Ray. And Mike, this piece has kind of evolved. I think we started off and said, hey, let's like dig into the tape on Pernell McPhee and Shane Ray, and it went from a written form piece to now we're on video. We're on video here to talk about this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, oh my, I'm excited about the way that it kind of has evolved because I think it was going to be a great written piece, even if it had only been that. But I think now being able to sort of show people visually the stuff that we were going to describe in words is just kind of an icing on the cake kind of thing, just adds kind of another layer to it. So yeah, I'm excited to get started too.
Now, just to give you guys a little bit of background, the reason that this came about is Pernell McPhee is an intriguing player on many fronts. And one of the biggest fronts, frankly, is that if you look at Pernell McPhee and the addition that the Ravens made in bringing him back to Baltimore, he's a guy that he doesn't have the numbers. Like the last three seasons, if you look at his numbers, if you just looked at the stat sheet, uh, if you were just to measure this based on sacks and tackles, it's you're looking at it and probably scratching your head if you're a Ravens fan. But the reality is that he's had a lot of impact as a pure pass rusher, and that's why we thought the only way we can kind of look at his impact is to go back through some of his very specific pass rush impact plays, and then to decide that could work in Baltimore. And Mike, I know you've kind of gone through the tape, but one of the quotes that we both found to be really, I think, almost like the theme of our discussion here, when Pernell McPhee said, "When you watch my film, you're always going to see consistency as far as getting the quarterback, as far as getting hits on the quarterback, and as far as being a run stuffer. But I never really, I know that's what the world's about. But if you watch film and you know a football player, when you see me, you'll know I'm a football player."
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree. I mean, he said it best himself, but the tape totally backs that up. We're going to get into this, I know, and it kind of spills over to Ray a little bit too. But
Right.
particularly as it relates to McPhee, when he's on the field, the defense is better because he does all the little things to help guys around him have opportunities to make plays. Even though, like you said, maybe he doesn't necessarily get credit statistically for that play, but he's usually the one when he's on the field that has created that opportunity, or at least somehow has influenced that play to give a teammate a chance.
Exactly. So that's McPhee. He's kind of more, I would say his impact is something you can only measure by watching the tape. And I think that's a good testament to the Ravens front office, like what they were looking for. And you mentioned Shane Ray. We don't want to forget about him because we're also going to talk about Shane Ray's impact. We're going to talk about what he brings to the table for this pass rush, and we're going to dig in to some of his tape as well. But we want to start with McPhee. And to your point, I mean, if you look at 2018 by any measure, again, nothing really stands out, but he just happened to have 13 quarterback hits in 13 games, right? So I have this way of defining, snap production. I think I define it as high quality snaps or high production per snaps. I'm still working on it, Mike. So it's not very
Understood.
not
Understand.
very catchy just yet. But I'm gonna come up with something. But like it's something I used to think about Brett Urban's impact, for example, like Brett Urban's impact. So whenever Brett Urban played, he seemed to have a very high impact per the amount of snaps he played, and those were limited snaps. So I take that and I translate that to Pernell McPhee, and when you look at McPhee, he's just consistently doing something positive, whether it's getting that hit on the quarterback, whether it's getting in or helping somebody else get the rush for one of his teammates, whether he's stopping the run. Any thoughts on that? Because I think we're going to get into the tape, obviously, but just that kind of premise alone, that he's able to give you a lot of value per the limited amount of snaps that he's played.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to try to capture. And I know you're going to come up with like a real cool sounding name for it. It's something I've been thinking about recently too, because I have gotten kind of into this expected points sort of world, because I'm not an analytics sort of guy per se. I definitely lean more heavy on sort of the visual and the tape, but I understand the importance that it plays, and so I'm trying to get better and trying to learn more about it. And that was one of the things that occurred to me, particularly when you're watching defense and when you're watching pass rush. So the guy who gets the sack, let's say it's a sack, he gets credit, and you see that expected points number go up or show up as a negative for a defense, because you're taking points away from the offense. But how do you credit the guy that maybe helped create that sack opportunity? Right. Should be something for that guy. And I think that's where you're going with your concept. So I'm right there with you. I mean, I would love it's almost like an assist,
Yeah, it's like an assist.
Whether you're talking about basketball or hockey or something. Or
exactly.
I think you even mentioned like a baseball sort of money ball analogy with like, on base percentage, it's sort of along that line.
Yeah, it is like that. Now I'll hold that thought of the money ball, like, because I do want to go somewhere with that. And I just actually am, kind of borrowing from our friends Pro Football Focus, who do such a wonderful job of coming up with this terminology that I just kind of totally, whiffed on a few seconds ago. But they have a formula called highest pressure rates, and amongst the guys that have ranked the highest since 2006, McPhee is third on the list. What they've measured out, it's 16.4% highest pressure rate, and that is behind Cameron Wake and Von Miller. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of a story of, their ability to measure him is not a guy that is going to rack up the sacks, but what is he doing to influence the pass rush?
Yep.
And again, getting back to that same kind of concept. But to your point, if we were to use the Moneyball angle, I also kind of liken it to on-base percentage, because I have this thought, like, this just is one of those things where DeCosta kind of put on his Billy Bean hat, or maybe, he's channeling Billy Bean. And it's like, how many at-bats can I get with this guy? Because from a pass rush standpoint, it's like, let's get somebody on base, or not at bats, but let me get somebody on base. In this case, let me influence the pass rush somehow, whether he gets to the guy or whether he helps drive the guy home, either scenario. And so I think it's kind of similar in concept, because again, it's not going to show up in the stat line as much as it's going to show up in evaluating his overall impact.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned it too, because once DeCosta sort of officially took over as the GM this year, and he's talked about Moneyball a bunch even before then. It made me go back and listen to it. I read it when it came out years ago, but now you can listen to it on like audiobooks. So I went back and listened to it, and all of that stuff sort of came flooding back in, and then you start to try to form these connections and these links between the guys that they're drafting and the guys that they're signing, and sort of how it fits into that Moneyball approach. And one of the examples they gave from that book about the O's, just following up on what you said, was, I mean, about the Athletics, what you just said was the importance of taking walks. Right, they wanted guys who would walk and get on base. Right, and they valued that differently than the rest of the league at that time. So I kind of see a corollary with a guy like McPhee. It's like the equivalent of getting on base. He's going to do something, whether if it's a twist or a stunt, he's going to pick a guy that frees up, the looping guy, or frees up the guy that maybe is coming inside, or he's going to rush in such a way from the outside that on a tackle that maybe that guard has to come over because he crosses that tackle's face. Now he's threatening him inside, and the guard's like, I got to come over and help. And so then the guard sort of, maybe he's not going to completely come off of his guy, but maybe he's, his vision is sort of taken over there a little bit. So he's the setup guy. He's setting up these other things that really
is the setup guy.
Yeah, and it really adds value. But like you said, it's hard to quantify unless you're watching the tape.
Exactly. So it's very difficult unless you're really studying that tape to measure it. But again, getting back to that same kind of formula, it's also a matter of just looking at the cap situation too, right? Like Moneyball getting back to getting the most out of the players that you pick up, and also them being cost effective. So there's something to that where you're generating. It's almost like, okay, we couldn't go out and get. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like
Khalil
Mack. Exactly, right. We couldn't go out and get Khalil Mack. So pass rush is something you can manipulate. You can, to an extent, right? And I think here that's what they're kind of doing by the design of it, is getting a guy like a McPhee who can kind of just totally shake up blocking schemes and really, play all over the place, similar to. And he was a Darius Smith before Zadarius Smith was a Zadarius Smith, so we know that. And in that role, he's going to be taking over. It's got tremendous, I think, translation. So I think there's something to that, like, looking beyond just the raw numbers, but looking at the impact, looking at his snaps, and to get the most impact from Pernell McPhee.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place for us to start to dig into the actual tape and kind of walk through a few, I think, significant clips from last year and situations that actually point out McPhee's impact as a Redskin, particularly because last year he actually, I think, nondescript again. McPhee was kind of lost in the shuffle, but he was a very impactful pass rusher with the Redskins, and they did a nice job of utilizing him and managing his snap count so that he could be effective for them in pass rush situations exclusively. So I know you've had a chance to pour through some of this, so I'm really looking for walking through. I think we got 4 games here lined up, or 5? I think it's 5, right? 5 games, 5 clips lined up. I'm going to toss it your way, Mike, at this point, and you can walk us through McPhee in each of these different scenarios.
Yeah, so we've got these 5 clips. The first one we're going to start with is a Week 16 game against the Titans. And you mentioned how the Redskins managed his snaps last year. I don't think he played more than 18 snaps, maybe only one time. I think he played 24 snaps in their last game against the Eagles. And so they had, guys like Kerrigan, Preston Smith, some other guys. So it could have been, attributed to who they had in the rotation, but also probably trying to sort of, help him because he's obviously had a history of some knee injuries once he was in Chicago. So I think if you can keep him around that same sort of pitch count, these are the kinds of plays and the kinds of effect that you can get for him. So in this first play, he's lined up on the offense's left side, outside linebacker. And one of the things that you'll see throughout all these clips, to me, and I'm probably reading too much into it, is I see some similarities to Terrell Suggs. How far he lines up outside the tackle, just sort of the body positioning, some of the other things that he does to kind of create opportunities for other guys that we've already hit on. I really think he took some of those things that he learned from Suggs in his time in Baltimore and applied them as he's gone throughout his career. So what you see on this play is he actually is able to bull rush the left tackle, Taylor Lewan, back into Mariota's face. Mariota ends up fumbling the ball. But the thing to really pay attention to is if you look at the play and you look at the defensive tackle, so the guy right over top of the left guard on this play, just Jonathan Allen.
Yep.
So what happens is that guard is kind of one-on-one with Allen, right? And then midway through, he looks over and sees that Lewan is sort of getting, a little stressed inside by Fee. Now, he also comes off because he feels like his center is able to take over Lewan for him, so he feels like he can go and help out with McPhee going inside on Lewan. But think about the impact that McPhee has on that play. By drawing that guard over, now Allen is one-on-one with the center, who didn't really have like great body position to really take him over like squarely. So he just arm overs the guy, and then he's unabated to Mariota, slings him down, and the ball comes out. And I actually think Mariota, it doesn't show on this clip, I actually think Mariota got injured on that play and didn't come back in the game. So, so you may look at that as, well, are you kind of, maybe stretching this and trying to tie things together a little too much? No, if you look at the left guard's reaction to McPhee sort of crossing Lawan's face and saying, hey, I need to go over there and help my tackle because he might get beat inside, then that sets it up for Allen to beat the center and, create this whole domino effect.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a domino effect. You take a look at that entire left side. Two guys, 2 to 3, right? So they didn't have a slide here. They didn't have anything other than kind of just mano a mano. And McPhee, because of the initial just domination of one of the best left tackles in football, right? Taylor Lewan is no stiff. I mean,
He's
he's
no
a good
slappy
player. He's no slappy. So like, you have the left guard, to your point, overcompensating. The center then ends up being in a position, and probably, he was going to help out anyway, I think. But like you said, the angle, the position, the technique changes tremendously. And the thing that really stands out too about this play is just how quickly McPhee is able to get to the front, and how he's able to just jolt Lewan straight back into Mariota, right? Like, so, I mean, you could probably show this tape from a technique standpoint as like something other young rushers should emulate. Yeah, so I think that you're right. I mean, one of the things that really stands out is just the domino effect that he could have when you're talking about making it easier for the guys around him, his teammates. And we could easily see something like this translating to wing scheme, Don Martindale wing scheme. So I think especially with the tackle and kind of stunt action, in this case, they didn't even have to do that, but it kind of served the same mechanism in a way.
Yeah, no, you definitely can see that translating because, I mean, you just look back to last year and you think about all of the different things that they did with rush games, with movement, with aligning guys up in different places to take advantage of matchups. He's like the perfect fit, right, in that puzzle. And as we go on to, I'm going to move on to this next clip in the Dallas game. That point that you mentioned about just his quickness, it's still there. I mean, like, he's explosive, he's still quick, he still has power. And you see it in these clips. So we've got 2 clips from the Dallas game. The first one I'm going to start with, I want to say, is in the fourth quarter. I think they're both in the fourth quarter, actually. But again, you're going to see him on the offense's left side. And now we're talking about Tyron Smith, right? We talked about guys not being slappies. Right. There's maybe not a better left tackle in the league than Tyron Smith when he's healthy.
Yeah,
he's one of the top guys in the league. And so you'll see on this rush, let this play out a little bit. Okay. So you can see McPhee starts out, outside, kind of sails a speed rush outside for a step. Then, we got a rush game going on here, right? So he's spiking inside to pick the left guard. Really, it's perfect. I mean, it's almost textbook in terms of how you would coach that with, crossing the left tackle's face and then attacking the shoulder of the guard, right? So now both guys have to come over and put body on him, right, and occupy him. Mm-hmm. And then that allows Allen to loop. And what I like about what Allen does is look how tight he hugs. He doesn't take like a really wide looping step. I mean, you could scrape paint, off of how close he is to McPhee right there. And McPhee, you can see he's got Tyron Smith's shoulders turned, right, perpendicular to the line of scrimmage at this point in time. And he can only get that one outside arm out to try to stop Allen's charge. And no matter how good you are and how strong you are, you're not going to stop many defensive tackles in the NFL with one arm. And so, Allen is able to kind of power through that one arm that Smith was only able to extend, but he was only able to extend that arm because of just how aggressively and how violently McPhee, spiked inside to create that picking situation. And, Tyron just wasn't able to keep his shoulders square to McPhee and to the line of scrimmage so that they could pass that game off a little more cleanly. He just exploded into that gap just too fast for them to do that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And it's interesting, almost as like a wide nine technique here.
Yep.
I don't know if that stands out too. And then, like you said, kind of bursts from that stance. So I don't know if Tyron Smith was kind of confused. Obviously, like, I don't know if he was anticipating that inside move, because that may have also thrown him off, and he was anticipating to pick him up outside with the back helping out too. But either way, the play definitely stands out also because of that. Like you said, it's textbook technique. Just being able to pass, just being able to work off each other and set up Allen. And yeah, like to your point, Allen, that was a nice little move there. He didn't take it too far to the right. He just kind of let the action go around him and then just looped out over. So overall, like this is a good example too, again, of the type of line games that the team could run.
Yeah, your point about his alignment is spot on. I mean, that's that sort of analogy I was making with Suggs. You can picture just how wide Suggs would line up at times.
That's a good point.
Outside of that tackle, and you're right, it creates these notions, these thoughts in the tackle's head about, well, if he's out there that far, there's no way he's going to be able to cross my face from out there.
Right.
He's got to be rushing me outside. So maybe I need to kind of hang out there a little bit more, or at least think about setting out there a little bit more. And then he does cross your face, and now you're in what mode, and you got to try to stop him from ripping inside. And then he picks the guard as well, and he just creates the sack opportunity for Allen. So Allen gets the sack, but it was totally created by McPhee.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's go on to
the
next Dallas play. All right, so again, at outside linebacker, this time on the offense's right-hand side. And this is something that Washington did. They didn't really move him around a lot like we think he'll probably be moved around here some in Baltimore just because of, how Wink likes to do that. They pretty much kept him in a 2-point stance, every now and then a 3-point stance like we saw in that last play, but almost exclusively at outside linebacker. And then what you see here on this play, and you see the flag come in. So this is just, a straight outside rush. He's one-on-one with La'el Collins. And what I love about it is look how violent, right? So he goes to this this chop and then this rip. And then when he gets to the rip portion where he's, literally just trying to rip up under Collins, he's already beat him around the edge. You can see Collins' body position. And so Collins knows he's beat, and then he sticks that arm in around his head, right? And basically clotheslines him because he knows he's beat. He's like, all right, he's got me out leveraged. He's got me off balance. I got to do something to try to keep Dak from getting hit. And so he just grabs him. And so there's another benefit, right? That doesn't show up as a sack.
Exactly.
It probably shows up as a pressure. I don't know how different people would score that, but it definitely, is a benefit to the defense because he draws a holding, and so there's a yardage benefit. You push the offense back 10 yards. So, I mean, that's a very clear benefit.
Exactly. No, I was just going to piggyback off that because that's almost like we get into drawing a pass interference, right? If you're a receiver like Torrey Smith, the benefit that you bring to an offense isn't just measured by the catches and the touchdowns, but there's penalties that you're drawing. So similarly, I mean, how many pressures have we not been able to measure for certain pass rushers because they drew a penalty or just got tackled before they could get to the quarterback? So that's a pretty clear demonstration here of a negative play that he was able to help influence, but back again, get the result. But it's significant, of course, because it ruined this particular play and caused Dallas to go back, right? So, and the other thing that I just wanted to throw out here, to your point, yeah, a lot of the moves or a lot of positions is he's going to be standing up, but it's good to see him shift as well, and to be able to then show his ability to get underneath Collins with the dip move, which is kind of like another example, one of the moves that he has, and he's got a few different moves, right? So he's pretty crafty as a pass rusher as well.
Yeah, and again, he's like he said himself, going back to where you started the intro. He's just a football player. I mean, you look at that play, and yeah, he stresses Collins a little bit with sort of his speed, but it really at the intersection point, that's just power. That's just getting up on the guy and just ripping through a guy, and forcing him to grab and hold you. So, to Pernell's point, hey, you watch his tape and this is what you see all over it. And here we're about to see some more. So we're going to take a look at these two plays from the Arizona game, which was their week 1 game last year. And let's see, in this first one, again, I think he's on the defensive left side. Yeah, he's on the defensive left side. And he's going up against DJ Humphries, I believe, in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in that stand up role again. And again, notice how wide he is. I mean, he's actually almost walked out over the slot receiver over there.
Yeah.
And he gets that violent club on on Humphries' outside shoulder, and he goes club rip on him. And I remember, his introductory press conference in Chicago. And I know things didn't work out from an injury standpoint for him there, but one of the comments that he said in that first press conference is, "I'm a violent dude." And that's what you see when he hits guys with his hands. I mean, if you look at how he pins Humphries' outside shoulder with that club first and then rips up under it. So think about that's your one arm, right? You've got this one arm that you're trying to stop this guy with, and he's just attacking that arm aggressively. And you can only get your other arm on his back at this point because now he's beat you and he's got your shoulders turned. And so this pressure, that's a very clear pressure this time, actually, you can argue had an effect on this interception because Bradford, is feeling that pressure not only from McPhee. I think you see Allen on this clip gets some inside pressure as well. And so he's got to get that ball out. And so it speeds up a quarterback's timing, right? It speeds up everything. And now you get this overthrow and it turns into an interception.
Well, that's a cumulative effect too. So that's a great point. When you measure pass rush again, it gets back to you're disrupting the line, you're disrupting the backs, you're disrupting the tight ends, force protection itself. But now all of a sudden, the quarterback is speeding up his clock. So then the ball's got to get out sooner, and the receivers aren't ready. The routing and the timing of the patterns is off. So all that is part of measuring the value that he brings, or in combination, what can he do to disrupt the play? There's about, we talked about penalties with the Cowboys, footage, but there's so many factors, and I think this is a great example. And getting back to those violent hands, yeah, he had that reputation starting his career, right? And he's maintained it. He's a guy that has heavy hands, violent hands. He's really powerful, and he's able to strike guys and move them. So that's McPhee to a T.
Yeah, sometimes when you watch other guys, now look, this is the NFL, so all these guys are strong, all these guys are powerful. I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody, but sometimes you watch rushers, and it's almost like they're going through the motions sort of with their hand movement. It's almost like, all right, club rip, chop rip. It's like very like robotic, and they're just doing it because this is what they work on. But you don't necessarily see the same level of violence and power that you see with guys like McPhee. I mean, you can literally see the effect, like you said, with heavy hands. When he hits somebody, you see their body, react to that contact. So we got one other play here in the Arizona game. Again, back on the offensive left side, my man Humphries, he had a rough one with McPhee.
I was just about to say.
And so now this one,
on the schedule this year, I think they are.
They are. The Cardinals are on.
Yeah, they're on the schedule, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Humphries isn't playing left tackle, right?
I don't know. No, I don't know. I hope he is. And look, if he's listening, I'm sorry, DJ. That was uncalled for. I apologize for that. But you see McPhee again matched up against Humphries, and then what I like about this play is sort of the setup value, right? So we saw that last play where he rushes him outside and really stresses his outside. So what he does this time is kind of show that outside rush, right? Then freezes, right? And so when he kind of freezes in mid rush, it also causes Humphrey to stop his feet. And then once you stop your feet, he's quick enough and explosive enough that he can restart before you do. Like, offensive linemen are trying to set, they're trying to take their pass set and then redirect because they know that guys are actually going to move. They're not going to stay in the same place. But he's able to beat that redirect, cross Humphrey's face inside with a swim and an arm over. And then again, not Allen, Preston Smith, 52. Ryan Anderson, excuse me. That's Ryan Anderson. Yeah, another Alabama guy. He actually gets credited with this sack because as McPhee beats Humphrey inside and Bradford has to climb the pocket to try to escape or move, I think Anderson gets his leg, right? Yeah, he gets his arm and kind of trips him. So he actually gets credit with the sack. But I think, in my opinion, McPhee creates the initial pressure. Anderson, does his job too, and gets around his guy. But they both sort of create that pressure. I just think McPhee probably initiated it and then Anderson kind of cleans it up and is the beneficiary of it. So again, just creating opportunities for other guys.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have an opportunity where the pocket is already kind of destroyed at this point. Bradford, like you said, is trying to climb up. So, that's a great example of flushing Bradford out of his comfort zone. Talking about like pocket quarterbacks that the Ravens are going to face this year. We kind of talked a bit about the schedule just lightly, but that's what you want. Is you also want an edge rusher, and McPhee isn't, I don't think, defined as an edge rusher. I think he's a guy that can rush inside, he can rush outside. But when you have an edge rusher, and we've seen, and you've gone through these clips and really highlighted it perfectly, he's also a guy that, as a tackle, you have to anticipate his inside move. If you open up too much, if you overset a little bit too much, all of a sudden, if there's a lane inside, he's going to take it. He's not going to hesitate. He's not going to just. And I don't think McPhee's enough of a veteran at this point. He's got enough savvy where he's going to read the tackle, right? If he might come in going, okay, I might have an outside move in mind, he's going to adjust on the fly.
Yep.
And that's I don't know I don't know what his assignment was on display. I can't say that for sure, and neither of us can. But let's just say, for argument's sake, what if that assignment was a little bit different and he read the tackle? I mean, that's what you want, and that's what you're getting from McPhee as well. Is that inside created by the outside pressure, like you said, that initial outside threat created that inside pressure, and it comes out game that he can play.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point about his experience and being able to read tackles, read blockers, and sort of adjust his rush accordingly. Because I think one thing you see with him, and you see this pretty consistently with any good pass rusher, they have a plan. They have a pass rush plan, right, for what they want to start with. But they can also counter when you show them a particular reaction to that plan. So if he starts with that outside rush, and maybe he's been setting this inside move up in some previous plays because he's been rushing you outside. So now you start, like you said, oversetting outside. He knows that there's probably a good chance that he's going to get you to overset, but you may not.
Mm-hmm.
You may stay right down the middle. So he does have to kind of read that in real time, right? And in that particular case, I think the thing that he did to enhance it even more was, all right, I'm going to get him to set outside, but just to make sure I can beat him clean inside, I'm going to freeze my feet, make him freeze his feet, and then restart before he does, and then I can cross back over. Because sometimes you see guys, they're just a little bit too anxious to work that inside move. They don't set it up, right? They take a step outside or two steps outside, just immediately come inside. And sometimes that works. But NFL offensive linemen are pretty good at redirecting. So I love that little added layer of nuance to chop my feet, get you to stop your feet, then I'm crossing your face and getting inside. So that's a vet move. That's that vet savvy that you talked about.
No, and it's what this pass rush absolutely needs, and especially with Terrell Suggs being gone, right? And that's a Suggs type of approach. He learned from Suggs, as he's talked about, and he learned from a lot of the Ravens' top rushers, whether it was Dumervil, whether it was Suggs, whether it was, going back to the Super Bowl team when you're talking about. If you look at, like, Jernigan was on that team, so there was a number of guys that, and obviously the Rays and the Ed Reeds were on that team too. So I think that's a value that he definitely brings, is that he understands it and he's going to impart that to the other guys. Jalen Ferguson comes to mind immediately. How to be able to set up your opponent, and so that's a great breakdown, Mike, of the tape. And I think the tape that the team was probably looking at, right, and just saying, all right, man, this guy's like making tremendous impact as a rusher, play to play. So I think the next thing that I guess we should talk about is, how does this translate to the Ravens, right? So I think you brought up a phenomenal stat, and if I think you covered it, but if I didn't capture it accurately, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But he really only played like 18 snaps a game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 24 was his high against the Eagles. So that's a good number. And it's hard to quantify in a given game, what that might measure out to based on the number of offensive possessions the opponent has, based on how many times they're throwing the football, all those things. But I think in a nutshell, if we're saying 35 to 40, plays, give or take, something like that, if he can
Mhm.
cut his snaps down, there's a good measuring stick right now with his effectiveness for the Redskins on that limited snap count. Like, any thoughts on that, or you know what that may mean with the Ravens as well, with obviously Wink and the way he manages, and he managed Suggs too. I know you
Yeah.
studied that as well. So can you kind of add a little bit to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's an approach I would expect them to take for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. And then I think what it also does is, so you're protecting a guy who maybe has had some injury history. Obviously, it keeps him fresher. It keeps all your rushers fresher as you can rotate them in. I know that's something that one of our colleagues over at RSR, Kim McCusick, he talks about how much
Oh yeah,
energy is exerted in pass rushing and how
it's true.
important it is to have that rotational ability. So yeah, I definitely would think that would be an approach that they want to take. And then if you look at, sort of the competition they have, at that spot right now, like opposite Judon, I think everybody assumes Judon, obviously is one of the starters at outside linebacker. But then, like you mentioned, you've got the rookie Jalen Ferguson, you've got Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser, you've got McPhee, you've got Shane Ray, who we're about to talk about
Right.
in a minute here. So don't know, how that's all going to shake out with competition throughout OTAs and training camp, but whatever they end up with in that group, you're going to have the ability to rotate guys through
Mm-hmm.
and sort of maximize what they do best, right? So
Exactly.
maybe McPhee is more of your high leverage kind of guy, in certain situations. Maybe that's Tim Williams, right? If you're looking for a guy who's got that pure speed, bendy, edge rush kind of ability. So maybe he's your high leverage guy. Maybe McPhee is your rundown guy. You have this ability to kind of mix and match. You Tyus Bowser, right? He can match up against tight ends and play guys in coverage probably better than any of the other outside linebackers. So everybody kind of has a little bit of a complementary skill set in that
Mm-hmm.
group. And I think it's pretty cool that they've kind of orchestrated it this way, and we'll see how it
Yeah,
shakes out.
it's interesting because we're kind of talking about this casually before we started this recording, and we were saying, if you're Eric DaCosta and you're saying, I can't get Khalil Mack, I can't make a trade for Khalil Mack, like what can I do to manufacture a pass rush? So this is kind of a way to do that when you have a bunch of complementary pieces that work off each other. Now, the beauty of McPhee, though, and you, I thought brought up an excellent point, is that everybody has their own role, but the beauty of McPhee, I think and where I disagree with some of the sentiment that's been out there, which is that McPhee may not even make the team. I think the only way McPhee doesn't make the team is if he's hurt, if he can't play, because this guy is a catalyst. He is he's gonna be the catalyst for the pass rush because he can play multiple positions. He can play on either the left or the right side. We saw that in the clips you broke down. Now, on the inside, he can put his hand down. He can play on the ball. He can play over the center. He can be in a different variety of stand-up positions. So he's a guy. Again, getting back to that, the word joker or the term joker is thrown around a lot, but he's gonna, I think, take on the Zadarius Smith role. He's the one that kind of started the Zadarius Smith role. Not even kind of, he did before Zadarius became who he was. So I anticipate as well with McPhee, it's not just a matter of the fact that you're able to have versatility and to your point, play at everyone's strengths. But I think McPhee can kind of rotate and move around to accentuate other aspects of the pass rush, whether that even gets to the blitz, right? Like bringing extra defenders. McPhee could help with some of that, where you might bring the slot corner, or you might do some ways to take some chances with an extra. So his ability to play in multiple spots is, I think, very influential on this pass rush scheme in 2019.
Yeah, and I even left out, and I didn't include any of these clips for this piece. I may have tweeted some out at one point, but because they didn't have him do it a lot in Washington last year, but I even left out dropping into coverage. I mean, he didn't do it a
Right.
ton, but there was at least a couple of plays, and there was one play that I highlighted where you could see him communicate pre-snap with I can't remember if it was a nickel on his outside shoulder because he was on the offensive right side. So I don't know if there was a nickel outside of him or maybe it was a safety dropping down, but you could see him sort of communicating and motioning that, hey, we're going to in and out this guy, right? We're going to bracket this guy. I'm going to take him inside, you take him outside. And the Redskins actually had kind of a trips formation to that side. And because of that communication, and then obviously, what the corner and safety were doing too on their end, they were actually able to bracket all three guys on that side. And so
There
I
you
think,
go.
I think that was against Dallas. And so Dak had to come off of that read and he had to come back to the ISO, receiver side. And I think that was covered pretty well too. So he had to pull it down and scramble. But that's just another one of those vet savvy kind of things that, hey, I could just line up and we could just play the coverage, but I'm going to communicate, right? And I think we've heard Harbaugh talk about that too, where he said during OTAs that a good defense is a loud defense, a defense that communicates, a defense that talks, is that communication is so important. And he's a guy that does that. You see that a lot on not just in coverage, but even on run plays where he's letting linebackers behind him know that, hey, I'm going to spike inside again, a la Suggs, that hard spike across the tackle's face into the B gap. So now that guard can't climb up to the linebacker, or he at least is delayed in climbing to the
Right.
linebacker. And now the linebacker can scrape outside him and make the play. So he does all of that stuff.
No, that's a phenomenal observation too. You're right. Like he's going to be able to make some adjustments. He's going to be able to influence these plays on the fly. So I think that's another thing that to take into account, and that may mean coming up to one of the other guys and saying, "All right, let's just switch positions." Like you said, he could drop into coverage, but he could also change up. And I know Wink is giving these guys more free reign. Last year, he gave the defense more free reign to make those types of calls on the field, depending on what they're seeing. So imagine a scenario where McPhee goes up to whoever is on the field. Maybe it's Pierce, maybe it's like you mentioned, Tim Williams, any number of these guys, and just thinks, okay, well, maybe we can do a stunt on this play. Let's figure it out, like on the fly.
Yep.
So I think that value is going to be there, and I'm sure the Ravens are going to be counting on it. And Harbaugh having familiarity with McPhee, I think, is going to help tremendously.
No question.
So that's McPhee, and I think we're both in agreement that I think when you look at his impact and you think about him, I think it's going to be measured tremendously on snap to snap impact. When he plays, he's going to bring a lot to the table, but don't necessarily get worried about the production, the raw numbers, and let's hope he stays healthy.